theories are entering a dangerous...
Information is the oxygen of the democracy.
There's so much evidence out there that even if less than 1% is true, that would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.
Thank you. I globally muted my mics during the intro. Thank you, chat. Welcome to Free Speech Friday. Welcome to Friday, March 6th. Welcome to the end of the world, the start of a whole new era. There's a lot going on. It's been a hell of a day over in Ian Carroll land. I've been building things. You've been watching things that I've been building. And raise your hand if you can guess what it was that you were just watching. Chat, do you think you know what it actually is that you were just watching? Because no, it was not the Bermuda Triangle. And yes, I was working on building it until literally 5 minutes before we started the stream. Oh, man. And it's so freaking cool. And I'll tell you all about it. But first, let's introduce our stream. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about, because we are at the precipice of a very important and dangerous time. And I think everyone has a sense of this, obviously, because America is at war with Iran. Israel is at war with everybody. The whole world is on the brink of being pulled into it. And depending on your awareness of history, on your awareness of global geopolitics, you may or may not be aware of exactly how precarious the position is right now. I think a lot of people are concerned about what this war specifically might turn into. Very legitimate fear. I think a lot of people that are looking beyond the narratives have an understanding that you might not actually get the victory that you're promised out here. It might not go as hot as they're all telling us. That's not the concern that we're here to talk about today. Or at least it's not the primary concern that we're here to talk about today. We are here to talk about the crux of the entire global world order and of the entire zeitgeist, if you will, of American political thought and American mind control in our generation. And it is 9/11. September 11th, 2001. It is time that as a nation, we all confronted the truth that has been staring us in the face for a very long time. The truth that has been very well evidenced for a very long time. What exactly happened on 9/11? What is all of the evidence that was covered up around 9/11? Do you really think that a small handful of Muslim terrorists armed with box cutters were able to evade the detection of U.S. intelligence agencies for over a year of planning while they were right under their nose, while they were being surveilled by U.S. and Israeli intelligence very closely. And then we're able to directly collapse at free fall speeds 3 steel skyscrapers one of which that was not even hit with a plane, for the first and only time in history. There's never been another instance of skyscrapers of that construction collapsing in anything resembling that way from fire and structural damage. And I have done deep dives and shows about the many other instances of steel frame skyscrapers being hit by planes, being literally bombed to pieces and not collapsing. But those 3 buildings collapsed, and they collapsed in a very specific way that only has one scientific explanation. And we, like anyone that wasn't so traumatized that they just clenched up their fear sphincter at the start, anyone that looks at that objectively can easily tell that those buildings came down with controlled demolition. There have been many expert voices calling very loudly about this for a very long time. And it is long past time that we talked about it. But there's a lot of new evidence and new awareness that I think has prepared the American people for this conversation specifically. In a way that perhaps we were not ready for it in the past. Because ultimately, it's a very uncomfortable conversation. It's a very scary conversation. It's not a conversation that most people want to have. But it's a conversation that we need to have. And it's a conversation that we need to have before something like it happens again. And I just got a little distracted for a moment, you might have noticed, because I was just checking on the status of the YouTube video to just make sure that everything was all kosher on the back end and make sure we're all live and good. And I noticed something that I've never noticed before just now, that the live stream is demonetized already, which is interesting. So I suppose in considering that, if we're already going to be demonetized based on the title or thumbnail, then we might as well just speak completely freely about what exactly happened on 9/11. Because what are you going to do? Demonetize me again? So, tonight, we are going to cover some of the stuff you already know about 9/11, briefly. But really, we're going to fast forward through all of that to the much deeper layers that some of you mega deep divers might have heard of, probably have heard cursory stuff about. We're going to slide through a whole bunch of the deeper evidence about what might have actually happened there. And we're going to start, I suppose, is the way to say it. We're going to start with a new piece of evidence that has just come out recently that is taking some adjusting. It's taking some massaging into everyone's ability to understand. Let's just dive in. Let's just dive into it. And then at the end, probably halfway through, probably all throughout, I'll show you what I built, which is the Epstein tracker that you were watching at the start of this presentation. It's a banger. And I'll give you some updates on web and all of that. But first, I want to remind you, in case you have forgotten, that in the Epstein files that they released, we discovered, the whole world discovered, that Ghislaine Maxwell was sent emails shortly after 9/11, and then again in 2003, and I think one in 2004 as well, that mentioned some really weird stuff related to 9/11. Shortly after 9/11, she was getting weird messages with just weird wording, but the really striking one came January of 2003. Subject, the Shadow Commission invitation. It came from Ed to Ghislaine Maxwell. Quote, any interest in being on the Shadow Commission on 9/11? The membership list is secret. Rough cut at edwardjepstein.com/pieces.htm. Let me know. Regards, Ed Epstein. Probably nothing, right? Sounds like nothing. Sounds like nothing. Can't imagine why someone like Ghislaine Maxwell would be receiving an invitation to the Shadow Commission on 9/11. Remember, this is when they are putting together secondary reporting on 9/11, when people are calling for more answers, when people want independent investigations. And so when people found this, the first question everyone started asking is, what's the Shadow Commission? What would this be doing? And I think the obvious answer, the presumable answer, would be covering something up. Seeing as the membership list is secret, seeing as it's called a Shadow Commission. And this is the thing with evidence, is when evidence comes up, it has to be assimilated into your working theory of what the hell is going on. And so, speaking of working theories of what the hell is going on, first and foremost, we really got to remind everybody that your theory has to account for this. This is Building 7, if you don't know. It was not struck by a plane. It was not struck by a hijacker. It was hit by some incidental debris, and there was some minor structural fires on one of the floors up high. It decided to control demolition itself, or Larry Silverstein decided to pull it, one or the other. We're not entirely clear on which came first, the Silverstein or the egg. But obviously, it wasn't just Building 7 that collapsed into its footprint. All three towers collapsed directly into their footprint at free fall speeds, at accelerating speeds, at speeds that only occur in controlled demolitions. All of the concrete was pulverized to dust and ejected outwards as though thrown by explosives. This does not happen when towers collapse. They came up with an entire commission organized by NIST, entirely controlled, that omitted all of the most obvious suspicious evidence that we're going to go over today and focused in on a bizarre, complex, theoretical physics answer that was very much theoretical and has never been shown to exist in any other circumstance, entirely made up, that some very convenient sheathing of the core and melting of the steel under strange heat and temperature conditions just caused it to go despite the fact that steel construction towers like these that were built decades earlier have been bombed to pieces. There's a famous one in Warsaw, Poland that survived all of World War II. It was bombed so much that it was basically just the steel frame, all mangled up, that was left standing after the war. It never collapsed. It certainly did not collapse in on itself. And so when you see a thing that is physically impossible, at least by the accepted narrative, you have to look for other evidence. And if there was no other evidence, then yeah, maybe you'd have to find a way to make the theory work. But in this case, there's so much other evidence of a so much more obvious and likely theory that was just covered up, that just was not reported on. And so last, we'll watch the famous BBC report that was shelved, obviously, because the BBC on the day of 9/11 reported that the World Trade Center Building 7, the one not struck by a plane, the one that there'd be no reason it would ever collapse, that building, the BBC reported that it had collapsed 20 minutes before it collapsed. And they actually literally aired a segment where the woman was saying that Building 7 had collapsed while it was standing in the background.
Few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result.
Oh, I must have clicked on a link.
Now, more on the latest from where the new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's
It was because the
attack.
building had
We'll
been
probably find out
weakened.
more now about that from.
But remember, this report is airing before the building has collapsed.
Our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that
This is
behind
a real
that, there's
report
an empty
that really
piece
did
of
air.
what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
So, we could do many shows, and we probably will, about how ridiculous the mainstream narrative is, about how insane it is to suggest that these terrorists with box cutters hijacked these planes and flew them into the towers, given their flight records, their flight logs, their flight training history, how horrible of pilots they were. They managed to do a crazy flight right into the side of the Pentagon, right into Donald Rumsfeld's secret little budget office. They managed to collapse 3 towers in New York, impossibly. They managed to drop their passports out of the burning planes, out of the exploding rubble of the towers, to be found in the streets. The lead hijacker managed to leave an entire suitcase dossier with all of the hijackers' photos and names in the airport, just for fun, just so that authorities could find all the names of these Muslim hijackers. Because it was very important that Mohammed Atta just leave all that important documentation lying out there so the authorities could find it right away. And so that very day, Donald Rumsfeld could start talking about targeting Afghanistan. He could actually start passing notes that are documented, asking if they had enough evidence to hit Saddam on day 1, despite none of the hijackers being Iraqi, having anything to do with Iraq, ever being no connections to Iraq. They were all Saudi Arabian for the most part, a couple from Egypt. They weren't from Afghanistan. Just little details like that. So the main story is riddled with holes. So many more holes than we just mentioned briefly. But the real story is well documented. It was just covered up. And in fact, the fact that it was covered up, the fact that none of it was mentioned by the 9/11 Commission or in the NIST report, that all of this stuff that we're about to talk about was somehow avoided, that fact alone should be enough to make you wonder, what exactly was the Shadow Commission? And what exactly did they shadow? Who was on this secret membership list? Everything I'm about to show you is primary source files that have been thoroughly reported on by many, many, many independent journalists before me. I am not breaking any new ground today. I am just threading together the most obvious and likely explanation for what actually happened on 9/11. And the most obvious and likely explanation is that it was an Israeli operation. It was an Israeli false flag. Based on the evidence, that is very much the only possible explanation that I have ever seen evidenced. Because someone had to plant bombs in those towers. For them to come down in that way, someone had to plant bombs. That's a controlled demolition. Okay? Beyond that, they got caught. They got caught and arrested. Most of the CIA that was involved in the case and in the reporting, most of them thought that that Israel was in some way involved in the attack, and that's documented. Many of the FBI agents thought that Israel was directly involved in the attack, and that is documented. All covered up, never reported on by most of the mainstream news, but it's documented, and we're about to go over all of it. Also, the largest foreign spy ring targeting America in possibly our entire history, at least since the Cold War. The Israeli art student spy ring was a massive Mossad spying operation targeting American government buildings and American government officials all across the continental United States for the entire year of 2000 and 2001, leading into the attacks. And we'll look at evidence carefully compiled by very good journalists that clearly demonstrates that many of these cells just so happened to overlap directly with the various residences and training areas and locations where the Arab terrorists resided in the U.S. Almost like they were being surveilled and guided along their path by Mossad. We'll look at the evidence of how American comms were compromised and being surveilled and tapped by Israel on the way to this attack. And we'll look at some of the people that didn't show up to work that day. Some of the people that profited handsomely. Some of the people that seemed to know in advance that something was going down. This is going to be a cursory and initial pass on all of this. To truly do this story justice, we're going to need a whole series, and we're going to do it. In fact, to truly do this story justice, we're going to need web. And I'm going to plug it real quick because web is down, and some of you might have been wondering why. And it's because web is getting ready for production launch, and there's a couple of key features that we have to take some time to prepare. One of them is we're loading in all the 9/11 files so that all of us can use the power of web to search through all the available 9/11 documentation and ask these questions for yourself. Like, hey, what were the names of the Israeli moving truck company employees that were arrested? Hey, what did they admit under polygraph? Who was responsible for them being deported back to Israel? What's the deal with the structure fires? Were they ever investigated? What was Larry Silverstein's insurance policy? All of that and more, you'll be able to ask Webb with the 9/11 files loaded in there. But furthermore, we're preparing the system that will allow you to upload your own document sets. Now, you probably won't want to upload massive document sets like the Epstein files, 9/11 files, because it actually costs quite a bit to process documents. I've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars processing all these documents for all of us to read. And I don't regret a goddamn single page of it. But all of that is prepping with Webb. Not to mention this super freaking cool Epstein tracker that I've just been vibe coding myself today. All that and more coming at you soon. So Webb is down for a couple of days. And we intend to have it back up, live, and launched in its official form, hopefully on Monday. So thank you for everybody that beta tested it. The beta test is now closed, if you don't know. Appreciate all of you. Loved having you. Give it a couple days. We'll announce it when it's back. And oh boy, I cannot wait. But as far as 9/11, as far as Israel goes, everything that we're going to go over today, I'm just going to show you sources. There's many more sources than what I'm going to show you, but I'm going to show you sources. Primary as much as I can. And if you want to dig into them, I would invite you to search for things you see on the screen, to search for keywords, to look them up yourselves. Momentarily, they'll all be on Webb, and you can use that to look into it. Okay. We'll skip the key finding. Well, no, we'll skim the key findings at a glance, and then we'll roll into the main reporting here. Okay. Number 1, 5 Israeli nationals were arrested on 9/11 after being observed celebrating and filming the burning towers. These are the famous dancing Israelis. We'll get all up in them in a minute. A 61-page DEA report documented about 140 Israeli nationals posing as art students, systematically targeting federal facilities. One of the largest spy operations that has ever targeted America. This was all through 2000 and into 2001. Number 3, Israeli messaging company Odigo confirmed that its employees received warnings about 2 hours before the attacks. Number 4, Israeli companies Amdocs and Converse, Infosys, had deep access to U.S. telecommunications and law enforcement wiretapping systems, as in Israel built a back door into the U.S. wiretapping systems that they sold us. And so they were able to listen in on all of our wiretaps. And the FBI just kept on wondering, how do these terrorists keep on evading us? How do they keep on staying one step ahead of us as we're trying to surveil them? Number 5, Larry Silverstein acquired a 99-year World Trade Center lease 49 days before 9/11, insured it for $3.55 billion per occurrence, and then sought a $7.1 billion double payout. He didn't quite get the full double, but he made out like a freaking bandit. And we'll get all into the other friends of his that brokered the sale and helped make it happen. We probably won't go as deep as the asbestos that made it a condemned building in the first place. Number 6, Zim Shipping, 49% owned by the Israeli government, broke its World Trade Center lease and moved out 1 week before 9/11. They initiated the move a little earlier than that, but they hustled the shit out of there. So, let's dive into the actual evidence. Let's dive into the sources. But before we do, before we get into the actual sourcing behind these claims, why are we talking about this today? Everyone's talking about war with Iran. We're going to war with Iran. We're winning this war with Iran. Why are we stopping to talk about an old terrorist attack that happened years and years and years ago, a whole lifetime ago? We killed bin Laden. Al-Qaeda be dead. Well, actually, Al-Qaeda is running Syria now, but, let's not get caught up in the details. Obviously, we are talking about 9/11 because this war is not going so good for Israel. And anyone that is informed about the state of the world today, truly informed, a lot of them, a lot of us, we should all be a little concerned about what Israel might do if they start losing. And once you actually truly confront the dark and difficult truth of what actually happened on 9/11, not the fairy tale that they told you, the real evidence, the only evidence that could possibly explain those controlled demolitions that we saw, you have to reassess your understanding of just what exactly Israel might do. Because this would not be the first time that Israel has harmed its allies. It would not be the first time that Israel has done false flag attacks. It would not be the first time that Israel has fed false intelligence to America or to anyone else. It would not be the first time that Israel did something unspeakably evil to further its own ends. And we are currently at a point, at a precipice, where there is just about nothing that Israel would not do to achieve its goal. And it has put everything on the line for what looks more and more every day like an unachievable goal. Iran is bombarding Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is burning. The defensive missile stockpiles that are classified, we don't know how many they have, but they just seem to not be firing as much anymore. We seem to have been pushed into a conflict that we were not ready for. And Israel seems to be in deep, deep trouble. Iran is probably back on the trail to making a bomb. They're probably actually going to make a bomb now. And there's probably not a lot that Israel can do about it, except for maybe do something unspeakable to Iran, or if they follow their past patterns, maybe do something unspeakable to us, to motivate us to fight a little harder for our masters. And that's what's really got me concerned. And I think that that's what should probably have all of us concerned. And that's what we should all be vigilant about. Because let's just tell it straight. We're already demonetized, so let's just say it straight. Hypothetically, in a hypothetical world, just in my opinion, one of the most obvious and evil plays that would be right up their alley right now, hypothetically, there's only one nuclear-armed nation with a secret nuclear stockpile that might endeavor to package one of those nuclear weapons into a little terrorist-looking suitcase, into a little terrorist-looking plot, into a little terrorist-looking cell, and go send it somewhere American to go off. And if they were successful at that and were able to blame that on Iran somehow, oh my gosh, Iran actually secretly built a nuke. Oh my goodness, we didn't realize, but then we found evidence that they actually were building a dirty bomb. They built a nuke. Somehow they built a suitcase nuke. We didn't think they had it, but then we found in the tunnels, we found it was right next to the anthrax. And Saddam's WMDs were in there too. And we found the cave where they built the suitcase nuke. And I'm not saying I think it's likely. I'm not saying I think there's any proof that that's going to, I'm not saying there's proof of anything. I'm not saying that I think that's going to happen. What I'm saying is that that cannot happen. And I'm also saying that there are people, not all of them, but there are people in the Israeli government that were they given the opportunity, they would do it. And you need only listen to their own speeches to know that they would do it. And so, I just figured that an American better say it now, in advance, that if anything like that happens on American soil during this conflict, or after, whatever, the number one suspect is not Iran. And it will never be Iran in that situation. And if anything like that happens, all of us should be looking squarely at Israel. And if anything like that happens, there can be no amount of condemnation sufficient. Because no one has broken the nuclear barrier since World War II. And it is critically important that no one breaks it. Everyone kind of inherently understands why. Right? But the calculus changes if you're a psychotic, genocidal ethno-state that has the opportunity to break the nuclear barrier and blame it on Iran. You know, right? Right? And I'm not saying that all Israelis would do such a thing. But it only takes a few bad cookies in just the wrong places. And we already know that it just took a few bad cookies to set up the world's largest child sex trafficking ring, to go blackmailing American politicians and celebrities by abusing and much worsening American children and children from all around the world. And so if they're willing to set that up on behalf of Israeli intelligence, let's just say that anything's on the table. And today, we are going to very clearly lay out, with very concrete official evidence, primary sources, to show you and to allow you to share with others that we very clearly know that Israel was behind 9/11. Certainly there were Arab terrorists. Certainly there were Arabs involved in some way. Just like there was a man named Lee Harvey Oswald that was in a building on the day that JFK was shot. He might have even had a rifle around somewhere, though that's a little spotty. So, let's get on to the evidence. We don't have all night. The dancing Israelis. On the morning of December 11th, shortly after the first plane struck the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m., 5 Israeli nationals positioned themselves in the rear parking lot of the Doric apartment complex, although there is reporting that suggests that they may have been there in advance. We're not entirely clear. This is across the river where they have a view of the trade centers. A white 2000 Chevrolet van bearing New Jersey license plate JRJ13Y and the markings of Urban Moving Systems, the moving company that they worked for, had been observed parking in the lot as early as 8:15 a.m., 31 minutes before the first attack. That's the other report that I'm talking about. A resident, identified only as Maria, observed the 3 men kneeling on the roof of the van, filming and photographing themselves with the burning towers in the background. In testimony she gave to the FBI, Maria stated, all of the males appeared to be jovial in that they smiled, hugged one another, and gave high fives. She wrote down the license plate number and called police. These men are known in the FBI files as the high fivers. Do I still have it all open? No, I think I closed them. All of these documents can be found online still. The original FBI report with all of the detailed pages going through the evidence, searching Urban Moving Systems, the moving company that they worked at. There is copies of the photos of the men with all of their faces removed. These are photocopies of photocopies, and so they're all fucked up. And so they're blown out, so you can't tell that right there in the empty white space is the burning towers. There were also photos on the camera, on the film reel. I'm not sure if they're in this copy. So right here. This date stamp that's on the photo, 10/9/01. So that's September 10th, 2001. The day before September 11th, they were taking photos with the towers in the background, although they're blown out and you can't see them, with a lighter lit. All of this was found on their photography camera film when they were taken in for questioning. Because after Maria reported them, a BOLA was sent out. And when the BOLA was sent out, the van was eventually stopped. The men were taken in for questioning. They were all Israeli, and they all worked for this moving company, Urban Moving Systems. And it turned out that after a long investigation, they were held for 71 days, I believe. They went through multiple polygraph tests, which they failed the fuck out of. And it turned out that there was a whole bunch of moving companies that were staffed and owned by Israelis, most of which vanished into the mist right after this happened. They searched the van, and there was explosive residue found in the van. There was a pair of skis found in the van too, which is really weird, and it's just always on my mind. It's a whole saga in the reporting of how they change people in the van. Skis get put in the van, people get out of the van, they get back in the van, and at a certain point, they hand off the video camera, probably to their handler. And the FBI never found the video camera that Maria reported them to have filmed with, but they did find the film camera. They found a bunch of cash. They found a bunch of maps with a bunch of highlighted locations. A bomb-sniffing dog yielded a positive result. Lab results were never publicly released. And the van oddly lacked equipment typically used by a moving company, and that was noted specifically by the FBI agents. And then when they went and raided the moving company's offices, they discovered a bunch of weird shit, like a lot of technology, like a lot of very advanced technology. And they asked a lot of the employees that worked for the moving companies, and it turns out that they were pretty much all structured with a whole bunch of foreign nationals from other countries, like Russians and stuff like that, that did all the moving. And they basically all had stories about how the Israelis never really worked with us. They always did other stuff. And they always treated us like shit. And a bunch of the other employees of these moving companies gave a bunch of crazy quotes of what those Israelis had said to them that we'll get into another time. The FBI developed 76 photographs from the camera. Reports describe the Israelis as visibly happy in nearly all photos with the burning towers in the background. The section of the FBI report asking, quote, did the Israeli nationals have foreknowledge of the events at World Trade Center and were they filming the events prior to and in anticipation of the explosions, was redacted in its entirety. Vincent Canestraro, former CIA chief of counterterrorism operations, stated, quote, many people in the U.S. intelligence community believed that some of the men arrested were working for Israeli intelligence, he added. From the beginning, the FBI investigation operated on the premise that the Israelis had foreknowledge. So, when they looked into Urban Moving Systems, Dominic Otto Sutter, an Israeli citizen, owned the company, but he fled to Israel the following day in the midst of an ongoing investigation into him. Peace. Surprise. Police found the building and all contents abandoned. Sutter and his wife appeared on the May 2002 FBI suspect list alongside the 19 hijackers. The assessment was that Urban Moving Systems was a front for the Mossad and operatives employed by it, as reported by the Forward in March 15th, 2002. Spy rumors fly on gusts of truth. And this is a Jewish publication, in case you cared. And in case it needed to be pointed out and clarified, what does a moving company do? They drive a whole bunch of box trucks around the city filled with stuff. Like maybe the kinds of explosives that you would need in order to rig a building to demolition itself. Just a thought. And there was a whole network of Israeli moving companies, not just the one. And there were other sightings on the day of what looked like white vans and trucks with people that seemed to be taking photos of and or observing the tower collapse in somewhat suspicious ways. It was only the one that ever got stopped and kind of so thoroughly investigated. So whatever happened to them? The 5 were held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn for 71 days, some in solitary confinement for 40 days. All were deported in November of 2001 on immigration violations. No terrorism charges were filed. They were banned from re-entering the USA for 10 years. After deportation, 3 of the 5 appeared on Israeli Channel 2, hosted by Yair Lapid, who later became the Prime Minister of Israel. And Oded Elner stated, quote, "The fact of the matter is we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event." And I don't know as I actually have the clip queued here. I'm sure you've seen it. I mean, I guess we're already demonetized. This is probably a pretty gangster documentary.
Kind of their article for the record.
Democracy Now! Getting into it, but it is not the clip I'm looking for. So we'll skip the clip. That is a direct quote from these Israelis after they got back home and got a little too comfortable with their loose ass lips. Quote, "Our purpose was to document the event." You know, the event that they had no foreknowledge of. The event that they could never have known was happening, obviously, because it was a fucking secret terrorist attack. An unprecedented terrorist attack. So, the DEA report. We're going to skip over so much crazy shit that you cannot even begin to comprehend today, okay? In June of 2001, 3 months before 9/11, the Drug Enforcement Administration's Office of Security Programs completed a 61-page internal report titled "Suspicious Activities Involving Israeli Art Students at DEA Facilities." It documented approximately 130 separate incidences involving Israeli nationals posing as art students who systemically attempted to penetrate federal facilities all across the country. Okay? And let me actually pull up the original report. I think I already have it open here somewhere. Okay, we'll just open it fresh. So, this right here is the complete text of the report. And I have read through every single word of it back when I was first looking into this. It's long. And what it's divided into is by division. So they requested that all the different divisions report back. They were like, yo, guys, there's some really sketchy shit going on with a bunch of Israeli people that are like coming in, posing as art students. And it's really weird. Have any of y'all seen anything like this? And then all their different divisions reported back like, oh yeah, that happened like 4 times. Here's the story. We documented it. Or some of the divisions reported back like, no, I haven't seen anything. Or I don't, whatever. Right? And it's things like, here's their summary. The activities of the Israeli art students raised the suspicions. Here, we'll zoom in a little bit for this. Raised the suspicion of IS and other field offices when attempts were made to circumvent the access control systems at DEA offices, and when these individuals began to solicit their paintings at the homes of DEA employees. The nature of the individual's conduct, combined with intelligence information and historical information regarding past incidents involving Israeli organized crime, leads IS to believe the incidents may well be an organized intelligence gathering activity. It is believed by IS that these incidents should not be the basis for any immediate concern for the safety and security of DEA personnel. However, employees should continue to exercise due caution in safeguarding information related to DEA investigations or activities. Most of the suspects that they spoke to, the Israelis, admit to having served in the Israeli military. This is not surprising given the mandatory military service required in Israel. However, a majority of those questions has stated that they served in military intelligence, electronic signal intercept, or explosive ordnance units. Some have been linked to high-ranking officials in the Israeli military. One was the son of a 2-star general. One served as the bodyguard to the head of the Israeli army. One served in a Patriot missile unit. That these people are now traveling in the U.S. selling art seems not to fit their background. Because what they were doing was walking into secret government facilities that are not marked on the map, so to speak, opening the doors and going in with art that was like very mass produced and being like, Hi, I'm an Israeli art student from blah, blah, blah university, and I was wondering if you wanted to buy any paintings. It's for whatever cause. And it's like, bitch, what? Why are you in this classified facility for the DEA? Like, that was literally their opening move. And in some instances, they actually started to get some access. And there are reports in this document. I bet that bug, I don't know what the keyword I would need to search would be. Listening? No. Maybe device? There is one story in specific of one team of them that kind of got caught actually trying to plant listening devices. But I don't really know what keywords I would have to use to find that specific part. There's all sorts of stories of various confrontations between DEA and law enforcement officials, FBI agents, and these various Israelis inside the buildings, at their own homes, where they were later solicited by these Israelis, which is all kinds of sus all on its own. It's a whole thing. You can read into it if you want. Just look up Israeli art students DEA report. You can find it for yourself. Okay. Now, Gerald Shea's memorandum to the 9/11 Commission. Gerald Shea, a Yale-educated corporate attorney, compiled a 53-page memorandum addressed to the 9/11 Commission, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, dated September 15th, 2004. It mapped the geographic overlap between Israeli operatives and hijacker cells in detail. However, the 9/11 Commission's final report had already been released in July 2004, and the memo was never incorporated. And that memo is the source of some of the most important charts in the whole story. What he did was he mapped out where these Israeli art student cells had been located. And he noticed that they had been located awfully freaking close to where they knew that the Arab hijackers had trained and lived and waited and acted from. Because they had been surveilled all along by various agencies. We actually aren't going to talk about Operation Able Danger today, but that's a whole other story. So the green is the Israeli DEA groups, and the red are future hijackers and other FBI suspects in the terrorist networks, in the Arab terrorist networks. And they overlap surprisingly a lot, like right next door in downtown Hollywood, Florida. Like in the same cities often, and all over the eastern seaboard around Manhattan, right nearby. And when you look at the larger American map, because the Israeli art student groups were all over the country, and these various aspects of these Arab terror cells were all over the country, there was a striking amount of overlap between the two. Almost as if the Israeli spying operation, one of the largest ever discovered on American soil, was directly keeping tabs on all of these Arab terrorists. Just in case something were to come up, like a little bit of controlled demolition work, like a quick move that needed some moving companies, to help out. So I think you can probably pick up what we're putting down, like not really beating around the bush on it too much. And obviously, you can look up Gerald Shea's memorandum to the 9/11 Commission and you can read it for yourself. Media coverage and suppression. French publication Intelligence Online first reported on the DEA memo publicly. Le Monde called it undoubtedly the largest case of Israeli spying in the United States that has been made public since 1986 with the Pollard case. Although it was much larger than the Pollard case, just not necessarily more significant. But once you put the pieces all together, it was more significant. The Washington Post responded with a dismissal, DOJ spokeswoman Susan Dryden called it an urban myth. An urban myth, like urban moving companies, the vans with explosives in them that knew about the attack before it happened. Investigative journalist Christopher Ketchum completed an 11,000-word investigation for Salon in 2006. 1 hour before publication, editors killed it. He then placed it with The Nation, which accepted and scheduled it, then pulled it at the last minute. It was finally published by Counterpunch in March of 2007. And I just want to read one quote from it. Quote, the former CIA counterterrorism officer told me that, quote, there was no question but that the order to close down the investigation came from the White House. This is the investigation into the Israelis. It was immediately assumed at CIA headquarters that this basically was going to be a cover-up so that the Israelis would not be implicated in any way in 9/11. Bear in mind that this was a political issue, not a law enforcement or intelligence issue. If somebody says we don't want the Israelis implicated in this, we know that they've been spying the hell out of us. We know that they possibly had information in advance of the attacks, but this would be a political nightmare to deal with. And then the article also goes into the art student spies and much, much more. Awesome article. Shout out to all the journalists, all the hard freaking core journalists that came before us, that laid the groundwork, that did the work, that published it all. We are in their debt. And they paid great prices for this, to get this out there. So we're not going to go super deep into Odigo, but on September 11, 2001, approximately 2 hours before the first plane struck the World Trade Center, 2 employees of Odigo, an Israeli instant messaging company, received messages warning of an imminent attack. They were located in Israel, in the same city that housed Mossad headquarters and IDF Intelligence Unit 8200. It's not really clear why they received a message or how they received a message. But somehow or other, they received a message warning of an imminent terror attack threat, not specifically bombing of the trade centers. Who knows? You can look this stuff up as well. Just going to show you one of the sources. Haaretz has a paywall that I don't pay for. But there are many sources that, are still out there on the internet. Even if they're in old school 2001 format, you can find them. Now, Israeli telecommunications penetration. Carl Cameron's Fox News investigation. In December 2001, Fox News correspondent Carl Cameron aired a 4-part investigative series on Special Report with Brit Hume, detailing what investigators described as extensive Israeli intelligence operations inside the United States. The series covered 2 Israeli companies with deep access to American communications and infrastructure, Amdocs Limited and Comverse Infosys, which is now Verint Systems. This is how they knew everything that was going on. Israel-based Amdocs was the world's largest telecoms billing service, handling billing records for 90% of all U.S. phone calls for clients including AT&T and Verizon. This gave the company access to transactional call data. Who called whom, when they called, how long, for essentially every telephone call made in America. Cameron reported that the NSA had issued a top-secret SCI report in 1999 warning that the records of U.S. calls were getting into foreign hands, specifically Israel's. In a separate case, an Israeli crime network running cocaine and ecstasy trafficking had obtained phone data on law enforcement officers through an Amdocs subsidiary. In May of 2000, the FBI probed allegations that Israel had penetrated 4 White House telephone lines and relayed real-time conversations to Israel. And all of that was ignored. The NSA, the FBI, multiple reports that Israel had our phones tapped, that Israel had the White House phones tapped. Bill Clinton? It's a real shame when they tap your phone, Bill. So Comverse Converse Infosys, a subsidiary of Israeli-run Converse Technologies, provided the wiretapping equipment used by U.S. law enforcement, FBI, DEA, and others. This is a long pattern with Israel. Provide the technology layer, and then insert a back door. And you got them. So they provided all the wiretapping equipment that U.S. law enforcement used for court-ordered electronic surveillance. Cameron reported that the equipment allegedly contained a back door, allowing wiretaps to be intercepted by unauthorized parties. Converse maintained a permanent remote maintenance link to the wiretapping computers. Key details from Cameron's reporting. 50% of Converse's R&D costs were reimbursed by the Israeli Ministry of Industry and Trade. DEA Security Director Heidi Raffanello expressed concern that Converse remote maintenance was not addressed in contracts. Several government agencies expressed deep concerns that too many unauthorized non-law enforcement personnel can access the wiretap system. And investigators told Fox News that, quote, to pursue or even suggest Israeli spying through Converse is considered career suicide. Because remember, this is back in the day. Back when you were antiseptic for even asking questions. Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, former commander of Unit 8200, told Forbes in 2007, take NICE, Converse, and Checkpoint, for example, three of the largest high-tech companies, which were all directly influenced by 8200 technology. Because that's how they make all of their tech companies, is they have their spies start tech companies, and then they make those tech companies public companies, and then they sell their services all around the world. For, just for business, obviously, just to make money, right? Quote, virtually the entire American telecommunications system is bugged by two Israeli-formed companies with possible ties to Israel's eavesdropping agency. And Converse's CEO, Kobe Alexander, described as a former Israeli intelligence officer, was indicted in 2006 on 35 counts related to a 15-year stock options manipulation scheme. He fled to Namibia, where there's no extradition treaty, with $57 million, and he was eventually arrested by Interpol. And he's a fucking criminal. So, there's all sorts of sources on all of these things. There's films, documentaries, segments.
It has
we'll watch
been
a brief
more than
piece of this
16
one.
years since a civilian working for the Navy was charged with passing secrets to Israel. Jonathan Pollard pled guilty to conspiracy to commit espionage and is serving a life sentence. At first, Israeli leaders claimed Pollard was part of a rogue operation, but later took responsibility for his work. Now, Fox News has learned some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S., who may have known things they didn't tell us before September 11th. Fox News correspondent Carl Cameron has details in the first of a four-part series.
Since September 11th, more than 60 Israelis have been arrested or detained, either under the new Patriot anti-terrorism law or for immigration violations. A handful of active Israeli military were among those detained, according to investigators, who say some of the detainees also failed polygraph questions when asked about alleged surveillance activities against and in the United States.
So, long report got buried real good. But you can still dig them up if you know where to look. Zim, American Israeli Shipping Company, the North American subsidiary of Zim Israeli Navigation Co. Limited, the world's 9th largest shipping company and 49% owned by the Israeli government, had occupied the 16th floor of World Trade Center 1, the North Tower. In April of 2001, they announced that they would be relocating its North American headquarters to Norfolk, Virginia. The move was completed approximately September 4th, 2001, about a week before the towers came down. The company forfeited a $50,000 lease penalty so that they could vacate early, and they invested $6.2 million in a new building in Norfolk and built it fast-tracked as fast as they could. There's sources on that too. which we will just very briefly skim. Firms move to Norfolk will create 235 new jobs. Published in April 3rd, 2001. This is when they first announced it, and this is published in the Virginian Pilot, old school fucking website style. Governor Gilmore welcomes Zim, American-Israeli shipping coach in Norfolk, October 18th, 2001, right when they're first getting moved into the building. And paywall, April 9th, 2001, when they announced it. Larry Silverstein and the World Trade Center lease. So it was built and owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And it was up for a renewed lease. There was a whole bunch of asbestos problems that we're not going to get into. The buildings were basically condemned. You were going to have to spend more than the actual value of the buildings just to redo them all because they were all full of asbestos. It was a whole problem. But in February of 2001, this company called Vornado Realty Trust won the initial bid of $3.25 billion to take over the towers. But then the deal collapsed, and we'll talk about who was involved in that deal collapsing in just a second. And Larry Silverstein, through Silverstein Properties, was given 14 days to renegotiate. He swooped in, and magically, he got the lease. $3.22 billion bid was finalized on April 26, 2001, and it closed on July 24, 2001, exactly 49 days before September 11th. He only put in $14 million of equity because, finance, bro. So Larry Silverstein swoops in, and with the help of his good friends that we'll talk about in just a second, takes over this bid from this other company and pays essentially $14 million to own the World Trade Centers, valued at billions. Okay? He immediately starts getting an insurance policy. He engaged Willis of New York to set up a multi-layered insurance program providing about $3.5 billion per occurrence. Per occurrence mattered because although the final policy was not fully inked and signed and finalized when the buildings came down, after 9/11, Silverstein argued that two planes constituted two separate occurrences because he had gotten insurance against acts of terrorism, such as planes flying into buildings, specifically. And so when the buildings came down, he got very Silverstein about it and argued that two different planes constituted two acts of terrorism that he was specially covered against. And so he should get a double payout. Two jury trials proceeded to split results. The first found 10 insurers liable for one occurrence, and the second found 9 other insurers liable for 2 occurrences. The final settlement was $4.55 billion, which is a return on his initial investment of approximately 325 to 1, based on his initial $14 million investment. In 1 year. In less than a year. Larry Silverstein returned 325 to 1 on his fortuitous bid on the World Trade Centers. But he wasn't there on September 11th. No. He was there every single day, except for that day. His wife had to schedule a dermatologist appointment. He had to keep a dermatologist appointment. Right? Right. His son Roger and his daughter Lisa, who both worked for Silverstein Properties in temporary offices on the 88th floor and regularly attended the breakfast meetings, were both running late that morning and had not yet arrived when the first plane struck, so they survived. But a bunch of his employees were killed. Yeah. So, according to Haaretz, November 21st, 2001 publication, Silverstein and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu were close personal friends who spoke on the phone every Sunday. He was also good friends with Ariel Sharon and Ehud Barak, reportedly once offering Ehud Barak a job as his representative in Israel. I wonder if he knew Jeffrey. Silverstein served as chairman of the board of UJA Federation of New York, the largest local philanthropy in the world, with significant funding directed to programs in Israel. in case you didn't know what the J stood for. Right there. Oh, yeah, the pull it quote. Do we have the video? I don't think we have the video queued up. Oh, it's so classic. Maybe it's at this link. No, it's an audio file. Classic clip. If I hadn't been spending so much time vibe coding today, I would have pulled the clip for you. But the clip that I could have pulled is all about the building that Larry Silverstein did pull. And he's talking about Building 7 and about how it was on fire and we didn't know what to do. And I just decided to pull it, which is quite the admission because it collapsed of its own accord because of the structural fire, right? What did you pull? Pull what? Right. It is a term used in the demolition industry to refer to controlled demolition, obviously. Little slip of the tongue there. But Building 7 tenants were, it's pretty important. Solomon Smith and Barney was the anchor tenant, owning 64% of the building. The IRS, the Department of Defense, and the CIA all had offices, though the CIA offices were secret. The New York City Office of Emergency Management was there. Mayor Giuliani's emergency bunker was there. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, had a couple floors. The Secret Service had the largest field office in the country there. It was basically a giant government and banking building with a bunch of secret shit going on. And there's all kinds of cool conspiracy theories about what might have exactly been going on inside that building. Some is more evidence than others. The SEC lost depositions, trading records, and documents for several hundred active cases into financial crimes. I wonder who was committing all the financial crimes back in the year 2000, including major IPO investigations. The Secret Service lost all evidence from their largest field office. The EEOC lost over 10,000 cases. Building 7 insurance paid up to $861 million. Ain't that great, Larry? Obviously, NIST had to come up with this crazy fucking scenario that is just like the most unbelievable report ever. If you've ever read the NIST report where they just like contort themselves over backwards to be like, this is how the physics worked. This is how an office fire, when you set a table on fire, it'll collapse the entire skyscraper, bro. It's crazy, dude. It's crazy. The NIST report about Building 7 is one of the most crazy documents that has ever been produced in human history. Let's talk about Frank Lowey and Louis Eisenberg. Frank Lowey was Silverstein's partner in the World Trade Center lease, taking the retail and mall component through Westfield America. He was an Australian-Israeli billionaire, net worth about $10 billion. His background includes joining the Haganah, the Jewish terrorist organization, and then the Golani Brigade of the IDF. He fought in the Arab-Israeli War. He was a chairman of the Institute for National Security Studies, which is an Israeli national security think tank. He received the Israeli Presidential Medal of Honor, Israel's highest civilian award, and he founded the Lowey Institute, which is an influential Australian foreign policy think tank. A foreign policy think tank. I wonder what they thinked about the Bondi Beach shooting. Louis Eisenberg. He served as chairman of the Port Authority Board of Commissioners from 1995, during which time he negotiated and facilitated the World Trade Center lease to Silverstein and Lowey. He's a former Goldman Sachs partner. Eisenberg was a longtime leader of the Republican Jewish Coalition and later served as RNC finance chairman. In July 2017, President Trump nominated him as U.S. ambassador to Italy. So, Eisenberg, I totally did not see where that tab opened. Okay. Dead tab. So in March of 2001, Eisenberg puts out the little press release, just simple statement. and on behalf of the Port Authority, in connection with the net lease of the World Trade Center on February 22nd, 2001, the Port Authority entered into an exclusive negotiating period with Vornado Realty Trust. Remember, the first company that I was telling you that was going to get the lease. During this period, Port Authority staff and its advisors, J.P. Morgan, Cushman, and Wakefield, and Milstein Brothers Realty Advisors, you know, these names, have worked with representatives of Vornado to complete the contract and associated transaction documents. In view of the lack of a final agreement at this time, the Port Authority's Board of Commissioners has instructed staff and our advisors to engage in exclusive negotiations with Silverstein Properties and Westfield America to conclude a 99-year net lease transaction. And so, just by coincidence, there's a little Jewish triangle of people that just got the lease out of the hands of who it was going to and made sure it went to Larry Silverstein and his other Haganah buddy, his IDF buddy, business partner, real quick. All a coincidence. All just an antiseptic coincidence. Howard Lutnick. If you don't know, Howard Lutnick's been in the news for all sorts of reasons. Largely because of his good friendship with Jeffrey Epstein that he lied through his fucking teeth about. Most lately, because of surface photos of him apparently on the frickin' island. Cantor Fitzgerald was the nation's leading bond brokerage. More than 70% of all U.S. Treasury securities were traded through the company. Their offices occupied 101 through 105 of the North Tower, directly above the impact zone of Flight 11. On that day, more than 650 Cantor Fitzgerald employees were killed. That's 68.5% of their New York employees. But Howard Lutnick was not there. He was not in the office that morning. He was taking his son Kyle to his first day of kindergarten. I would love for the people that are digging into what day that kindergarten actually started school, I would love to know the answer to that. He raced to the scene, began grabbing people as they emerged, asking what floor they were on, etc. His brother died in the attacks. His sister was also not there that day. So his sister survived. Listen, this is just a conspiracy theory rumor that I cannot confirm at all. But I have heard stories, or theories rather, I've heard theories that maybe his brother faked his death. Which I wouldn't rule out. Because it would be a little awkward if all three of the Lutnicks just happened to not go to work that day. I haven't looked into it myself, but apparently there's some sus shit about the phone call or something. I don't know. Regardless of whether or not his brother lost his life, the whole thing's a tragedy, obviously. And the loss of all of these employees' lives, the loss of the parents of 955 children just from the Cantor Fitzgerald employees is tragic. But the reason why I kind of point at the Lutnick family is because you got to remember that unless you're going to go back to the guys with box cutters made the fucking towers fall down theory, the box cutters pulverized the concrete, collapsed a third building with a minor little fire. Unless you're going back to that theory, then you're back. Then you're back at the Israeli theory. And if it's the Israeli theory, then you got to wonder, why are all these Jewish and Israeli people not showing up to work that day? And oh yeah, this guy was really good friends with Jeffrey fucking Epstein. And Ghislaine was getting emails about being on the Shadow Commission 2 years later. It's a little uncomfortable. It almost sounds like he's a fucking evil demon. It almost sounds that way. Obviously not, because he would never. Got some notes on the Jeffrey Epstein connection. I did not know this before. Cantor Fitzgerald is custodian of 99% of Tether's U.S. treasuries. You know, Tether that Brock Pierce, another Jeffrey Epstein buddy, is the founder of. I did not know that. Did y'all know that? Evil Ranger, I appreciate you. We're just trying to fill in the gap. We're just trying to remind us all here. We're just trying to remind. There is so much evidence. This is not some fringe conspiracy theory. It's just that the Israeli spell was so thick for so long that you couldn't even bring it up without being called some crazy anti-Semite. And like, does it look so fucking crazy now? Now that you've seen them completely flatten an entire civilian population with no remorse. Now that you've seen them describe the Palestinian people day after day as literally Amalek, as cattle, that their children should be murdered viciously, endlessly, that they should all be wiped out because they have evil in their DNA, that they should murder children. Now that you've seen that we have the clearest evidence you could ever need that Epstein was an Israeli intelligence operation, that they were actively trafficking and raping children just to get blackmail on American politicians and celebrities. Now that we know all of that for clearest, for realsies, it's time to revisit the 9/11 story, because 9/11 is the most clear example of an Israeli intelligence operation you could have. Certainly well covered up, certainly well tabooed, but there were loose threads all over the place. Dov Zakheim and the Pentagon. This one I did not really know about before. I had heard about it, but I didn't really know how much was here or how interesting this piece was. Dov Zakheim, born 1948 in Brooklyn, served as the Undersecretary of Defense, the Comptroller, and the CFO of the Department of Defense, the Chief Financial Officer of the DOD, from May of 2001 to July of 2004. So think about it. What does the Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Defense do? He oversees the finances of the Pentagon, of the American military. Before his government role, though, right before his government role, he had been the VP of Systems Planning Corporation and CEO of SPC International Corporation. SPC manufactured the flight termination system, technology capable of remotely taking control of up to 10 aircrafts and navigating them from a central location. He is also an ordained Orthodox rabbi, which is just really interesting. That's just some fucking conspiracy fuel. That's fascinating. Because if you didn't know, there were some budget problems at the Pentagon right before 9/11 on literally September 10th. What a coincidental day to pick. Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, who obviously worked very closely with Dov Zakheim and obviously knew what was coming and was very prepared to look for evidence to blame it on anyone else, specifically on Al-Qaeda, Osama, and Saddam, despite there being no connection there. But one day before the attacks, Rumsfeld came out and made a public statement on video. Quote, according to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. Just $2.3 trillion missing. Whoops. Something that Dov Zakheim, as the chief financial officer of the Department of Defense, would have known intimately. If only he'd still been working back at SBC International, maybe he could have remote controlled some planes to send them out remotely to search for the missing money or something. You know? That sure would have been a useful technology to find all that money with. Right? Oh, by the way, he also, Zakheim, contributed to the project for the New American Centuries, Rebuilding America's Defense, which stated, quote, the process of transformation is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. PNAC, the authors of the Clean Break Report, all those guys, the guys that were actively advocating for like, hey, how are we going to get everyone to go to war with the fucking Arabs without some catastrophic catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor? Gosh, if only we had a new... Oh, hey, fucking terrorists flying into the buildings. Wow, how convenient. And I mean, you can read about our boy Zakheim if you want. You can peep that mug. Learn all about it. It's all in there. And you can go much deeper than Wikipedia, obviously. Or you can go read about PNAC if you want. PNAC is a great read. If you're not familiar with PNAC and you want to learn how to thoroughly hate the neocons, just go read some PNAC documents. Michael Chertoff. Am I reading from the right report? Is it possible that I'm reading from... Yeah, I'm reading from the right report. Probably. I might be reading from an outdated version. Yeah, I'm reading from an outdated version. We'll jump to the updated version here. Dropped in more sourcing. Because I wanted a little bit more sourcing on who exactly let these motherfuckers go. The dancing Israelis. And there's been a lot of discussion about who did exactly let them go over the years. Ultimately, the most concrete reporting that I've found so far, including the reporting of Whitney Webb at Mint Press News, is that John Ashcroft was the one that actually signed the documents under the supervision of Michael Chertoff, who is the head of the DOJ criminal division, playing a systemic role. He's the one that created the hold until cleared policy, which covered all 9/11 detainees. It's not exactly clear who made what decisions. Director Mueller, Robert Mueller, Bob Mueller of the Mueller Report was involved as well. All of them go on to have very prominent and important positions. John Ashcroft does go on in 2005 to found the Ashcroft Group, which then promptly takes on Israel Aerospace Industries as a client in January, but whatever. Michael Chertoff is of the tribe with all of his own ties as well. Oh, hey, high-profile criminal attorney Alan Dershowitz also intervened as a negotiator on behalf of the fucking dancing Israelis. Because Alan Dershowitz is allegedly, just in my humble opinion, like when I look at it as a person with an opinion, to me it looks an awful lot like it would be like he would be a spy. If I were to just read this book, this fiction, and be like, who's this character? I'd be like, he looks like a fucking spy. And then if I were to read the Epstein documents where they actually directly allege that he was a spy, that would probably also help to convince me. Because Alan Dershowitz just always seems to show up where Mossad operatives are in danger and need help. You really can't make this up. ABC News 2020 described the resolution as coming after, quote, high-level negotiations between Israeli and U.S. government officials, resulting in a settlement. The Israeli government acknowledged the operation and apologized for not coordinating it with Washington, because the way it got passed off, the way they smoothed it over, is, we were just spying. We were just looking out for you. We just had this massive spying ring spying on America, trying to infiltrate all of your buildings, trying to target all of your facilities, backdooring into all of your communications, tapping all of your phones, setting up all these weird moving companies with explosive residue in the backs. All that, we were just trying to help look out for America to make sure that no foreign terrorists got in. And Mossad even told parts of the American intelligence apparatus that there was going to be a terrorist attack like in late August. So they like warned us when it was too late, when it was too late in a convoluted way that they knew wasn't going to get through. But they always come back to this like, oh no, Mossad told us about it in advance. They tried to warn. It's like, yeah, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. That's not how that works. That's called CYA. That was part of the strategy from the beginning. That's called covering your ass. And that was how they sort of played it once they were trying to get all these Israelis out. Is like, yeah, they may be Israeli intelligence, maybe. But like they were just here to document the events. I mean, document any baddies just in case, just to look out for our buddies in America. That's literally how they spun it to all the American officials. And because a bunch of the American officials were actually Jewish American officials, it seems to have worked quite well. Or whatever. Maybe there's some other reason. I don't know. But it worked. And they all just fluttered off back to Israel. So, back down. Where were we? Building 7, Frank Lowey, the Pentagon, Israeli intelligence warnings. Yeah, so these are the warnings that I was talking about in August of 2001. Less than 3 weeks before the attacks, Mossad gave the CIA a list of 19 terrorists living in the United States, warning that they appeared to be planning an imminent attack. At least 4 names matched eventual hijackers. The warnings reportedly contained no specific indications as to the objective and was not deemed sufficiently actionable. Despite the fact that Mossad had been directly surveilling all of the hijackers all along. Through their flight school time, where it became very apparent that these motherfuckers could not fly a plane, all the way through to their movements across the country, their various stations, their posts, their outposts. They kept on moving. They would get their phones tapped by the American intelligence agencies, and then they would move and somehow evade the American intelligence agencies because someone seemed to be giving them a little bit of advance warning and keeping them one step ahead. It was very confusing. Operation Able Danger is a hell of a dig that we'll do another time. Benjamin Netanyahu's response. On September 11, 2001, when asked what the attack meant for U.S.-Israeli relations, Netanyahu responded, quote, "It's very good." Then he immediately self-corrected and said, well, not very good, but it will generate immediate sympathy. Again, behind a paywall. Netanyahu said Israel is benefiting from the attack as it swung American public opinion. Fucking paywalls. We are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack. The video clip is actually out there. I don't have it sourced right now, but it is actually out there, and you can find it. You've probably seen it. That was actually his response. Obviously, just a slip of the tongue, just a whoopsies, right? Benjamin Netanyahu would never cheer on damage to America on behalf of Israel. Especially if he'd planned, I mean, who knows? So the 9/11 Commission, the final report of the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States from July 2004, after the Shadow Commission email had gone out, right? After Ghislaine Maxwell's "Do you want to be on the Shadow Commission?" Do I still have it open anywhere? Oh, it's all the way back here. January 6, 2003. Shadow Commission invitation. And then, when the final report came out in July of 2004, it contained no mention whatsoever of the Israeli art student operations or the DEA report, the geographic overlap between Israeli operatives and hijacker cells, the dancing Israelis, the FBI's high-fivers, urban moving systems, or Dominic Suter, the Odigo advanced warning messages, Carl Cameron's Fox News investigation into Israeli telecommunications penetrations, Amdocs or Converse Infosys wiretapping concerns, Gerald Shea's memorandum, which arrived after the report was finalized, Zim Shipping's departure from the World Trade Center, or any possible Israeli foreknowledge or intelligence gathering operations at all whatsoever. Not a single one of those things was ever mentioned, despite all of them being documented in official FBI reports, in official DEA reports, in official journalism, in official circulation. They knew it all. They just did not include any of it in the official report on what happened on 9/11. Right? And that's because it was a cover-up. They did, however, in passing, mention Israeli forewarning, but they did not explore the breadth of documented Israeli operations on U.S. soil during the period. They just put in the one little thing of like, Israel tried to warn us. But just ignore the mountains of evidence that something else was going on in favor of this made-up goy slop that a couple dudes with box cutters that could not fly planes with invincible passports and whole briefcases full of all of their identities that they just decided to leave behind were able to control demolition 3 buildings with 2 planes. Oh yeah, and do a crazy corkscrew spiral directly into the side of a flat building. The kind of maneuver that the most experienced pilots would have a tough time effecting. That's a whole other story. And so suddenly, this email takes on a lot more significance. Edward J. Epstein emailing Ghislaine Maxwell. Wonder who was on that membership list. Hey, Ghislaine, did you ever find out? I mean, Ghislaine is still in prison. You know, we could ask her. Hell, as far as I'm aware, Ed Epstein is still alive. He's not Jeffrey Epstein's brother. So there's just a lot of Epsteins out there. Although we could ask Jeffrey Epstein's brother a lot of questions too, because he was fucking complicit too, but that's a whole different story. So, we don't need to go over the master timeline or anything. You can look all these things up for yourself. There is copious sourcing and evidence and documentation of all of this shit. These are all sources down here. All of these are sources. Okay? This is not some loony conspiracy theory. It's not some made-up hunky-dunky. Although there are loony conspiracy theories slid in to try to debunk everything, to try to derail everybody, to try to distract everybody. For sure. But what I have just showed you is extremely well documented in way more depth than I went into. And I would highly recommend that you look into it for yourself. Because we are in a time of great danger. We are in a time of maximum potential bad. Very bad. Very, very bad. And if the past patterns are any indication, we all need to be extremely concerned about what Israel will do when their back is up against a wall. And it is incredibly important that Americans all know the actual story that started the entire global war on terror, that started the entire American perception of brown Arabs as all terrorists. All those Arabs are terrorists. No, they're not. There are lots of Arab terrorists. There's lots of psycho-Arab people out there, for sure. There's insane amounts of inbreeding in the Arab world. It is super fucked up. If you want to laugh and cry and just have a really weird time, just start Googling Arab cousin marriages. It ain't good. It is not good. But that being said, you could also just start Googling Israelis talking and you'd see some pretty fucked up shit too, okay? So personally, I'd rather stay out of it and let them stay over there and fight their own wars. But unfortunately, they came over here, the Israelis, and started trafficking our children and blackmailing our politicians with it. And now, here we are. And so, we really need Americans to know the real story of 9/11, the uncensored, unfiltered, actual story of what happened on 9/11, because that is the story that drug us into this entire quagmire that has benefited Israel the entire time, that has been built on false Israeli intelligence all along. The fake WMDs, that was Israeli intelligence directly fed to us, completely fabricated. The intelligence today that Iran tried to kill President Trump, Israeli intelligence, zero evidence that it exists. No, there is no evidence. Not that any of us have seen, not that any journalists have seen. Just Israel saying, "Oh yeah, Iran tried to kill you, bud." You know, trust the country that is trafficking your children to blackmail your leaders. Right? So do I make myself clear? Do I make my point? In case I didn't make my point, let me make a point. Let me just make a point, okay? Let me drop one more plug on you and show you the coolest freaking tool in the world that your boy built just now, okay? Peep this game. Peep this game. Web. If you don't know, me and my boys, we made the Epstein files super tool where you can log into web, not right now because we're getting it ready for the real launch. We just finished the beta test with all the homies. It was the bomb. And it takes all of the Epstein files, millions of files, all of them. And it lets you have a chat GPT style conversation with them. Except it's not powered by ChatGPT because fuck them. But it lets you have a standard AI level chatbot conversation with the files, but it pulls in sources and it primary sources them, clickable links, understandable answers. So you can just search in plain language for anything you want in the Epstein files and you get answers. It's unreal. And it changes the game for how you interact with the files and how you actually search through them and uncover the truth. And it worked so well that we wanted to make it work for all the files, for every file. And so when it launches next week, you're going to have the opportunity to upload your own file sets, or even to just take a screenshot of the article you're looking at right now and drop it onto the canvas, and boom, it's processed and it's in your file set. And your web will include it when you ask questions. But we're also currently working on processing all of the 9/11 files so that the 9/11 document set can be in there as well. And you can ask questions about all that evidence that I just talked about and get those same answers for yourself. To all of the techie homies out there that have always the same questions, the very important questions, we will be open sourcing a version of it in the near future. That will take us time to develop. First, we're making the public launch of this. Then we'll flip on to getting the open source version out there. And there will be all kinds of cool interactions there. One of those cool interactions is what happens when you are able to take this massive data set like the Epstein files and plug Claude Code into the back of it. And what you're able to do, what you are able to do when you take the Epstein files and you plug Claude Code into the freaking back of it is you're able to develop an entire calendar of Epstein's entire freaking recorded life day by day of everywhere that he went on every single day with documentation to go with it. There are some gaps. I'm still working on filling in the gaps. And the further we get into his life, into like 2014, you can see all these documentations on these days. All this documentation of everywhere that he was. You can read from the files where he was. Here he was just in his little island zone, Little St. James. Then he flew back to Florida, Little St. James. Flew back over to his apartment in Paris. Do I have my documents linked up? I might have broken my document links when I was building the other feature that you all watched on the way into this stream. Because if you weren't here on the way into the stream, this mode is cool. The mode where you can scroll through Epstein's life day by day and track him all around and actually read all the documentation of everywhere that he was, everything that he was doing. Literally, like, he had breakfast with Beth and Ann Balvino. Then at 10, interview appointment with Gregory, potential decorator candidate from Russell. Interview, yeah, and I've got documents linked up for some of them. In the final version, I'm going to get documents linked up for all of them. Boom. So it's literally a day-by-day calendar of Epstein's whole fucking life. Sick. But then I got really hyped on it earlier, and I was like, dude, but what if we could hit play and just have it fucking scroll through his life? Oh, here, wait. Take off the big mode yet. We're not going to get there yet. And I'll put it on fast mode. And so this is just a trail of everywhere that Epstein was and was documented to be all along the journey. Because we've got all the files, and when you plug your shit into the back of them, you can do some crazy stuff, dog. So we're in 2014 and we're just scrolling, dude. We can put it on ultra mode and just bounce. And he's just back and forth from Florida to his island, Florida to his island. That's why it looks like Bermuda Triangle, because it's Florida and New York and his island. His apartment in France. Zorro Ranch. I'm pretty sure that was Zorro. And it's kind of interesting to see the patterns of Jeffrey Epstein's life. And it's also interesting to see the documentation when you're in the normal mode of all of that. But then, bro, then I just got carried away with the streaming mode, and I just had to make some crazy cool animation with all the different files that are associated with the different days and places, and I just started layering them in so we could make a cool freaking intro graphic, and that's what you were watching at the beginning of the stream, is you were watching the animation of Jeffrey Epstein's life and his travels based on the actual documents, with the actual fucking documents in the background, homie. Because why not, dude? Why not? And I will tell you, I literally broke it like an hour and a half before the stream started. I broke it because I was just trying to make this whole cool graphic situation happen. I was just so excited. And, is it going to auto? It's going to auto resize on us. So yeah, I broke it right before it was go time. And I was like, fuck, dog. And I was just like tripping out, like trying to fucking fix it. But I don't know what I'm doing. So I was like freaking out. So we literally got it fixed like right before the stream started. And there's a lot more to come on this. We're going to make this tool available in conjunction with the web launch so that you guys can all look through this thing as well. Capiche? So, if you aren't familiar, web is coming soon, and we're very proud of it. If you want to, we probably still have a sign up on here somewhere for you to get notified, but we will let you know in probably like 3 or 4 days, 5 days maybe, when it's all coming out, and it's going to be sick. It's going to have the document upload feature changes everything. It is completely like, it's not, I can't even describe to you how much that changes everything. That is the feature that I needed. That is the feature that I've wanted. That is the fucking feature, dude. Because then I'm like reading a Whitney Webb article about Jeffrey Epstein in my Jeffrey Epstein canvas. And I literally take a screenshot from the Whitney Webb article, drop her article in, and it is now processed and in my files. Same with Dropsite News or Mint Press or a new DOJ report or whatever it is. And suddenly it's processed and it's in your files, searchable in your archive. Or you can upload anything. You can upload the code to your most recent vibe coding app and have your code all ragged out. You can upload a Bible. You can upload a Talmud. And fair warning, large volumes of pages, like thousands of pages, is pretty expensive. I spent thousands of dollars processing the Epstein files for all of us, and I do not regret it. Would do it again. And lastly, I also want to plug, before we go, I want to plug Buyer, because Buyer is the bomb, and Buyer is actually the story that started it all. I met the guys that we made web together. I met them because they found me to help me make Buyer, which is the grocery store app that lets you use your cell phone. You know, bing, bing, bing. You use the scanner in your cell phone. You can scan any barcode of any product, and you just scan it, and it'll tell you who exactly owns the company that's selling you that product. Are they a family-owned company? Are they a mega corporation? Because ultimately, it's all follow the money. Ultimately, you got to manage where your money is flowing to. And money is what's ruling the world. And they have this corporate monopoly through the publicly traded stock market system, whereby all of those public companies, the mega corporations, all of them are owned by the same bankers. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, JP Morgan, Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, all the same people on all the same ownership sheets. And every time you buy any of those mega corporate products, even the ones that you think aren't mega corporations, but they are because they just bought them out, like Annie's Homegrown, like Burt's Bees, like Shea Moisture. There's a million of them. All that money just flows up to those mega corporations. They all flow up to the bankers. And, you know, we've kind of been talking about the bankers a little bit today, if you think about it. Although we did not mention all of the short bets that were placed on the airlines and all the other suspicious financial activity surrounding 9/11. We did not talk about all that today, but that's very well documented too. But Buyer app is out here for you to take control over your purchasing life, to take control over your grocery life, and decide what you're going to support, what you're not going to support, and who's going to poison you and who's not going to poison you. So download it off the App Store, download it off the Google Play Store for free, and scan their products anywhere in the world. It works everywhere in the world. And start voting with your dollar. Because we got to hit them everywhere. Everything we do, from Buyer to web to this, everything that me and my homies do, it's all about information. The more that we can arm the people with information, the more informed we can get, the more that we can fight back intelligently. Take control of our lives. Actually do something. So that's how I'm feeling tonight. That's how I'm feeling today. That's how I feel about 9/11. That's what we all need to know. There's a big story out there. And it's a story that more and more Americans are finally ready to talk about. And it's long past time we talked about it. This is the story of my generation. I am the 9/11 generation. And a lot of us have known this, have read this evidence a decade ago and more. A lot of us have already reestablished our worldview around this, but then it's easy to forget how jarring it is to be presented with this information for the first time. I get it. Like, I know that is a tremendous leap in your worldview to reframe your understanding, to realize that those buildings were controlled demolition. There's an entire organization called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. There's also a lot of backstory around the history of that organization. But there's been countless architects, engineers, and other scientific experts that have done independent analysis, and every single one of them, immediately, like without it, you don't even have to, like, it takes zero thought for these experts to just look and say that is obviously controlled demolition. Put them side by side with the videos. There is no world in which the physics of those buildings coming down as they did on video, especially Building 7, that wasn't even hit by a plane, no jet fuel inside, just a fucking structural office fire, is going to make a building just whoosh. And it's also going to make the BBC somehow be telepathic and report 20 minutes early that it was going to collapse, that it had already collapsed. Obviously, there's no rational explanation for that when the story is 19 Arab hijackers with box cutters that can barely even fly planes. All planned out from some fucking cave in the mud in Afghanistan. Obviously not. But once you know about all the evidence that we just talked about and you realize that none of that shit was mentioned anywhere in the official government report, despite it all being official government sourcing, the cover-up is pretty fucking obvious. And it becomes pretty obvious what the shadow commission on 9/11 actually probably was. So that's your show for tonight. That's what I got for you guys. That's all I got for you. It's getting late. I'm losing my voice and I got to go. But thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for liking. Thanks for commenting and hyping it up. I highly encourage you to clip segments of this stream and share it far and wide. Share it with your normie friends. Share the evidence in full. Share links and documentation and start talking about it, because now is the time to talk about it. If anything happens on U.S. soil, it was not Iran. I'm just going to say that today. So, God bless you all. God bless America. Pray for everyone caught in the crossfire of this war. Pray for all of the innocent civilians out there that did not ask for this, that just want to live their lives, live in peace, drink some water, eat some healthy food, do something nice for someone, tell people you love them, be a good person, and get some good sleep tonight. It's going to be a busy week for me. I'm going to try to stream. We'll see how it goes. But if I don't see you, I'll see you when I see you, and I really appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching.
Conspiracy theories are entering a dangerous
Information is the oxygen of the democracy.
There's so much evidence out there that even if less than 1% is true, that would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.